Well, this was the worst kept secret next to Virgil being in Devil May Cry 5. Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. As the title and intro suggests, I'm a little late. I'm going to be breaking down the Resident Evil 9 trailer from the Game Awards. Now, honestly, I did not actually believe that Leon was ever going to be in the game, despite a lot of the rumors and people debating whether or not he was going to be in the game, whether he was the hooded figure or this or that. I honestly thought the logical reason that they said about him not being scared and he's been through hell and them trying to do a survival horror campaign would not work for him actually making sense, because it is true to some extent. So him not being the main protagonist of the game actually made a lot of sense to me until I realized when this trailer came out what they are actually doing. They're basically splitting up the sides of the game that we all know and love about Resident Evil, the action side of things and the survival horror side of things, yet again, which is something they've done to mixed reception with the sequel games in the past. For instance, when you played the sequel games of Resident Evil 7 and 8, you played Ethan Winters. With 7, it was more of a survival horror experience, and towards the end, it briefly had some more action, and then with Resident Evil 8, it was survival horror mixed with action, very similar to RE4, and you would play Chris Redfield towards the end, and it was complete action all the way, similar to Call of Duty. This is something that's not really new to Capcom to try to have with the certain characters representing the certain gameplay aspects of Resident Evil, very similar to what Ninja Gaiden 4 did with the characters of Ryu and Yakumo. And I will say this was actually a pretty interesting reveal, and the fact that they are bringing back Leon has me very excited for the game and also very worried. And I'll explain a little bit more on that after I break down the trailer. So, starting things off, the new trailer gives us a familiar scene revealing the main villain, where he's sitting in a chair, Grace enters the room, and he's listening to some old-timey music from a record player. And it looks like this is Grace's first interaction with the villain. And we do get a good look at him, and he does reference a little bit from the Silence of the Lambs, and we do actually get his name in the trailer. I'll get more into that when we get to it, but I will say Capcom are the kings of misdirection, so whatever theories we might have might be proven to be not the case when the game actually comes out in February. So there is that. Grace and this character do have a bit of a conversation, which is something we've heard in multiple trailers where he calls her Special One, and now we actually see this face-to-face conversation, and we do hear bits of this conversation more throughout the entirety of this trailer. But I'll get into that a little bit more later on. The next shot we do see is at nighttime, where a police car is pulling up to a scene of some type of crime or something that's happened. And because of the disembodied voice that is most likely Hunnigan, they try to make it seem like this is related to a Leon scene. I believe that line from Hunnigan is somewhere else in the game and not here, because when you look closely at the scene, this takes place probably later on or early on into the game, and obviously a police car would not be something Leon would be driving because he's no longer a police officer, for one. And the disembodied voice does say, talk to her, is this like the others? And I do feel like this is a cut dialogue that is from another scene because we don't actually hear the responses to said dialogue. She makes a joke or a comment that I didn't fully understand, where she says, this is not postpartum validity, which I didn't really understand because postpartum is related to pregnancy, and honestly, this was kind of confusing for me. Unless they're revealing that Hunnigan is pregnant now, which, okay, I don't really know. And looking closer at the scene, we see a lot of different cop cars, and it's somewhere in the city next to some train tracks. So this could be actually very late into the game, especially considering the dialogue that is chosen with Hunnigan here. Now, we don't know if it is officially Hunnigan, but it's pretty much assumed to be, so I just wanted to point that one out there. Next shot we do see is a dead body, which is probably the cop, considering looking at his hands, they're covered in blood, and we do see a familiar shot later on that could connect to this. Looking closely at the body in the shot, it is covered by a tarp, so we don't see its face, but from what little we do see in the one bit of light in the shot, it is most likely to be the cop that was with Grace in an earlier scene in the game. And the dialogue that is said by Hunnigan in the next shot kind of confirms this, with her saying, oh, there's a missing cop, I don't know if this is related. And the next scene is pretty much the same cop that they were referring to with Grace, which we have seen in other trailers as well. She shows up at the scene of a murder, and she's joined by this cop, and we do see a little bit of that. We've seen that in other trailers, but we do get an expansion on that when we see the next shot, where there is a shadowy shot of a character with a black type of leather jacket and a blue button-up shirt actually spitting up blood and teeth, similar to the body that we've seen previously, and also the infected cop that we also have seen previously as well. So we know the cop that they were talking about earlier doesn't exactly go missing. He is dead because he gets infected, and Grace has to take him out, most likely, because we have seen him get turned in a previous trailer. And he went missing where the fifth body was found, which was the same crime scene where Grace was. And that kind of connects the dots. We hear more dialogue from our main villain, and then we see a shot of a computer that expands on the new virus that we're going to be having to deal with in this game, which is called Elpis. And we do see some different shots on the computer, like different DNA stuff, and also some looks at what this virus exactly does. And in the next shot, we do see Grace pointing her gun at someone, which was most likely the main villain, continuing his conversation with her from the previous shot earlier. Then we roll back to the previous crime scene we saw earlier, seeing a bunch of cops talking and a bunch of other things, and it's hard to really make out what's going on in the crime scene. But Hunnigan does say that they've settled on a prime suspect for what's going on, and this looks to be like a new character, even saying they have ties to Umbrella, which is our main villain throughout the entirety of these games. The next shot we do see is a gloved hand looking at a phone with a hooded figure, which we do reveal is the main villain of the game, Victor Gideon, which is an odd name to say the least, but whatever. I guess the Resident Evil games are no strangers to some weird names. Albert Wesker, Ada Wong, Chris Redfield, Leon.S. Kennedy, and Alcina Dimitrescu, and Ethan Winters. So the main villain being called Victor Gideon is not really too bad. And he could have been the hooded figure that we had in the early bits of the game, because it would make sense, even though it does feel like there are two different ones. The next shot we see is Grace looking at something for a brief amount of time and then getting startled and running to hide when Victor Gideon bursts into the room. Grace is actually hiding away while he is shouting her name, and we do hear him shout her name, and he looks kind of terrifying. The next shot we see is an area which we have seen in a previous trailer without the character that looks like Hunnigan walking towards the floor we see in the shot. Huntington actually mentions in the trailer that Victor actually purchased a building after Umbrella went under, which has me a bit curious on what exactly they're up to here. Now, the next part of this trailer gets absolutely insane after she says she's gonna send the address. And the next shot we see is a car pulling up to some type of manor, which kind of reminds me of Spencer Manor to some extent, or some type of mansion or sanitarium. Where we do know there is a sanitarium level in the game where we see most of Grace's footage. And I do think this is the building they are referring to that Victor Gideon bought, but it could be a different building in its entirety. We do get another look at this mansion slash big building, which we have seen in the first trailer. We get a better look at it here. Here's some secretary saying, "Welcome, Victor Gideon has been expecting you." We actually do get a good look at this character, and then we cut to the grand reveal. Here's some slight rock music as a car door opens and we see Leon for the very first time. And the disembodied voice that we hear in this trailer finally confirms it. And then we actually hear him briefly speak, and it does look like they are fusing what we had from the remakes and kind of continuing that look. We see a shot of him driving throughout the city, and then we see another shot of him actually at the crime scene we saw earlier. And we see a billboard, and Leon is most likely in the sanitarium area because he's looking through things, and even seeing an older picture of Dr. Gideon's research team. And we see another shot of Grace, but she's being pulled away by the creature that's hunting her down in the sanitarium, and we actually get a good look at that. Then the creature actually gets shot by Leon, and we see him save Grace. Then we kind of continue on from there, even having a brief interaction where things slow down between the two characters, and him actually saying, "FBI, what are you doing here?" We see a car driving into Raccoon City, kind of homaging Resident Evil 2. Hear a bit of dialogue from Gideon as Leon is looking on the computer and actually seeing how this virus relates to Grace. We see a couple other miscellaneous shots that are probably from Leon's campaign. We have this funny back and forth between him and this mysterious character, and him actually taking on some zombies, killing them in the street. We see the crater in the next shot from the first trailer, and also the Requiem side of things with Leon standing with a hatchet, which is actually pretty cool. After the title drop, we get some brand new scenes of an infected doctor, and then we get some actual Leon gameplay that kind of homages what they did with Leon's gameplay in Resident Evil 4 Remake, and kind of mixes some elements from Resident Evil 5 and 6 together, and then we get another look at the infected doctor as he's using using a chainsaw, which is iconic to the franchise. And then we see Leon again, and it does look like he is infected by this new virus by the marks on his neck. And then we see him fighting the infected, which does look like they are mixing together some elements of what they did with RE4, because we do see that iconic looking health bar, which slightly has been modified compared to that game. And also we see him doing the iconic shooting, kicking, but we do see him do something brand new, and that is actually using the chainsaw against one of the enemies. Now, they don't exactly explain how you can pull this off, but it is actually amazing, because how many times have we wanted to do this against these chainsaw pricks in Resident Evil? So many times. So seeing gameplay of Leon having that action mixture from Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5, but slightly being modified, is actually pretty cool. When you look at his actual design, it kind of reminds me a lot of an evolution from Resident Evil 4, with the jacket and also his face kind of being a progression of the facial model from the remakes, because it's slowly gotten older, and I like that. But I do have one major concern, is that if we are going to be mixing together and reusing assets from the remakes, like we have seen with RE9 with Leon's face, and also some of the level design from Resident Evil 2 remake kind of being used in this game, could confuse a lot of people, and it honestly feels a little bit lazy to reuse those older assets in the original timeline, because this is a sequel game like Resident Evil 7 and 8 were, and it is reusing the facial model from the remake, and that is a big problem that I have, not because it's bad, but because you're basically going to cause a lot of confusion to some extent. Yes, it's an older design, but it kind of is being paired with the remake, and it's losing the idea of, oh, is this a actual canonical sequel game, or is this a sequel to the remakes? You start reusing those assets from those said games and trying to add on to them and mix them together with the canonical timeline, it starts to make things very janky, and I feel like that's going to be something that this game is going to run into a little bit. Another big problem or worry that I have more or less with Leon in this game is that I hope with his campaign it doesn't feel like what they did with Chris in Resident Evil 8. I really hope they don't do that to him, because how Chris was in that game just felt very odd and alien, and it didn't feel like the Chris that we know and love. It just felt kind of like he was an antagonist at one point in the story, and then they kept changing it, and I don't know. As for Victor Gideon, will he be like Mother Miranda and kind of suck as a villain? I'm 50-50. I think he could be very good if they write him well, and I kind of have some interesting theories for him, because he looks a lot like Oswald E. Spencer. I do think this could be one of his children or a clone, but I honestly feel like this could work as just his own villain. He's not related to anyone that is a part of the canonical Resident Evil, but at the same time, it could work if he was Oswald E. Spencer's son. And the mother could actually be Mother Miranda. Now, hold up. Before you guys click off the video, this is a theory, but when you look at the character's eyes, they are yellow just like Mother Miranda's were, and how it could connect to RE8 is that we know that Spencer and Miranda were still in contact after he left to formulate Umbrella, and it could be said that he took her DNA and made some type of artificial baby that is the son of him and her, and basically kind of did a bit of a Wesker project. It's a wild out there theory, but it could be the reason why it connects to RE8 in a very interesting way, and it would actually make sense in my eyes, but who knows? This could just be an original villain, which is more than likely. And I do know that it is a bit of an out there theory, but I do think it does have some plausibility to be true at the same time. Is it going to happen? No, but I wanted to pitch it in this video anyways. And when it comes to the zombies, we did actually receive some gameplay recently that I didn't have a chance to cover a while back that actually sheds a light a little bit more on this virus that we have been seeing throughout the entirety of these different trailers and what it actually does. People that are infected with this virus have a very sensitive reaction to light and how it can burn you almost. You're almost like a vampire, which is very interesting. And seeing the brand new gameplay that we got a while back that I didn't have a chance to cover, these zombie enemies kind of are a mixture of what we've had. They're not like the complete Ganados from Resident Evil 4 or the Lycans from Resident Evil 8. The enemies themselves have enough intelligence like the ones we've had previously, but they do kind of act more like the zombies that are infected with the G virus from the previous games, which we see a little bit of in the gameplay, and honestly, it's pretty interesting. I do think on a theory front for how Leon is going to be infected, I think that he's going to show up and eventually deal with all these different creatures and other things, and similar to Ada from Separate Ways, he gets infected being careless and a bit overconfident, or maybe the secretary or Gideon himself jumps Leon and infects him that way, which wouldn't be the first time this has happened because we have seen it in the original Resident Evil 4, and I don't really like that idea. I think it should be out of carelessness when he is taking on these different creatures that he does get infected by accident, which I do think is more likely, but that's just my opinion. Now, I will say when it comes to certain aspects of this game and this trailer, they are amazing. There are some things maybe I screwed up on while recording it and trying to break it down, and details that I did miss, because obviously Leon does go to that crime scene. We do see a shot of it in the trailer, so I was wrong about some things. But I will say when it comes to theories, it's very hard to come up with actual good theories for this game because they obviously could be debunked by the time the game comes out sometime in February, and I don't want to look like a complete idiot here. But hey, that's just me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, whether you agree, disagree, or also let me know your theories and what you think is going to be going on, and your overall thoughts in general. If you did enjoy the breakdown, make sure to give this video a like, and also, if you didn't and it wasn't for you, change it to a dislike. It is perfectly fine. It kind of helps out either way when it comes to the algorithm, and make sure if you are new to subscribe and hit the bell notification button to be notified whether I upload, whether it's Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, or any other content under the sun. Now that I got this done, I'm gonna get back to the standard projects you guys will be seeing sometime soon, so have a happy holiday season, and have a good rest of your guys' and gals' night, morning, afternoon, or whatever it is for you in the world. Peace out. Bye-bye.